This is Gavin Gaddis in for Tom Webster for today, Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, a new map for podcasting. Tom previews the Podcast Atlas, a new study mapping how audiences move across audio, video, clips, social, and newsletters. All right, just a quick reminder, I'm reading for Tom today, so everything from here on out is first person from Tom. I'm taking a brand new piece of research to VidCon this week, its first outing anywhere, which is not the obvious room for someone who has spent 30 years measuring how people listen. We're calling it the Podcast Atlas, and it's the first thing we've made that tries to map the whole podcast universe at once. Not just audio, but the video, the clips, the social posts, and the newsletters that now travel with the show, and how a real audience moves among all of them. I'm finding I'm carrying into a hall full of vertical screens and ring lights that podcasting stopped being one thing you make and became a territory you live in, with the creator standing in the middle of all of it. VidCon gets the first look, but I'm saving the best for you in a webinar on July 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I mean, why not kick off your summer holiday with a fresh perspective? So the fair question, and a couple of you have already asked it, is whether I've finally gone over to the video dark side. I haven't. I'm going because the creators at VidCon have already lived in that territory, whether they call it podcasting or not, and most of them haven't heard that audio belongs in their universe too. There's an old turf war under all of this, audio on one side, video on the other, and Atlas is my evidence that it's over. The way the farmers and the cowmen eventually worked out the land was big enough for the both of them. Oklahoma has a whole song about that fight, and its actual counsel is territory folks should stick together. Rodgers and Hammerstein weren't thinking about podcast discovery, but they weren't wrong. If it's all one territory now, growing a show isn't about which side you stand on. It's about meeting people where they already are, whoever they are. I'm going to use that under 35 demographic today. It's not because they're the audience that matters most. If anything, the bigger opportunity may run the other way towards the 55-plus listener I happen to be. I'm using them because they're the clearest case of the rule. Where they already are is vertical video, one corner of that bigger map, and the one I want to spend today inside. I'm not the first to plant a flag here. Our partner, Hernan Lopez over at Owl & Company, has been making the largest version of the case. That vertical is where the next audience gets built. The smaller one I want is one our own Discovery Research makes, because it lands on anyone with the show to grow. If the listeners you want are under 35, you are going to have to get vertical. Start with what most shows still do instead. The launch kit has not changed in years. Cut a trailer, line up a few host-read swaps on friendly shows, get submitted everywhere, and lobby for a shelf in the apps. Every item on that list lives inside audio or inside a widescreen frame, and every item assumes the person you want already thinks of themselves as a podcast listener looking in podcast places. The Podcast Discovery Playbook, which we published last week, asks listeners where their current favorite show actually came from. The kit lands at the bottom, the trailer at 3%, an ad on another podcast at 4%, a host's recommendation at 8%. We fund those lines first, and listeners credit them last. In fact, in today's article, hi, Gavin breaking into the narrative here. In today's article, the graphic that Tom shares here shows YouTube found to be twice as favorite as the next source, with YouTube scoring 40%, Facebook 17%, and TikTok at 15%. Back to Tom voice. Now split discovery by age, and the real reason becomes hard to miss. For a listener under 35, finding a show is primarily a social video question. TikTok finds favorites for that group at 7 times the rate it does for people 55 and over. Instagram and Spotify skew young in the same direction. Our read of the TikTok audience is blunt about the mechanism. Vertical clips are the entry point. What gets found first is the clip, not the show. A thing shot tall, made for a thumb, watched with the sound sometimes off. And these are not fringe audiences. The listeners who found their favorite on TikTok are 60% under 35 and 36% Hispanic, the most diverse segment in the study. The Spotify group listens close to 4 hours a week, near the top of the report. The young, vertical native listener is also one of the most engaged you can reach. This is where the easy read says, fine, the kids are on TikTok, that's a young person problem. It's not, and our own numbers are why I would push back. The places that find shows for under 35s are also the places where listeners are most willing to act on what they hear. Net brand receptivity, the share most likely to consider a brand advertised on a podcast minus the share less likely, runs to 58 among Spotify discovered listeners, 55 on Instagram, and 52 on TikTok, against an all-listener baseline of 35. 18 to 34-year-olds overall come in at a net plus 31, ahead of plus 27 for everyone. Those vertical surfaces reach the youngest audience and the most brand-receptive one all at once. Our partners at Global landed in the same place from a different angle this month. Their new podcast show report found Gen Z over-indexing on nearly every action a marketer cares about, from searching a brand to buying the thing. And 76% saying they trust a product a host recommends because the host is openly themselves. Both studies point to the same place. A young listener is no consolation prize, but an engaged and brand-receptive audience worth reaching deliberately. And right now, you reach them in the vertical field. So what reaches them there is the next question, and the answer is not an ad. Among under 35s who found a favorite through social, 64% credit an organic post, someone they already follow, against 30% for anything sponsored. The unit of discovery is a vertical clip that belongs on the platform made by someone who lives there. Our channel mix guidance for this audience leads with it before anything else. Vertical clip first with organic creators. I should admit I am the opposite column in that table. I am 55 plus, and I find shows the old way. Another podcast, a name I hear somewhere else and go looking for. A website I already read. Vertical is not where I live. The launch kit was built for me, which is exactly the problem. None of which means the trailer is dead. It still works on the audience it was built for, the older and more audio-first listener, and on veterans who lean on a host's word more the longer they listen. Serving them is plain arithmetic. They're most of the audience listening right now. It's not a mistake to have a trailer, but a trailer is not a plan. And there is a harder mistake underneath that one. Vertical is a medium, not a format. Being on TikTok is not the same as being native to it. A trailer turned on its side is still a trailer. And a clip that reads as a podcast advertisement gets skipped by the very people you cut it for. The reason the platform reaches the young is that good vertical does not feel like marketing. It feels like the platform doing its ordinary thing. The moment yours feels like an ad, you have shipped the failing half of the old kit on a new surface and call it new. One more thing the report is clear about that changes the shape of the work. Discovery is not a launch week event. Half of podcast consumers went looking for a new show in the past month. The 3/4 of the people finished a limited series go hunting for a replacement. People are shopping for the next thing all the time, which means a vertical presence is not a stunt you run at release and switch off. It's a habit you keep. So the practical version is concrete. For a show aimed at people under 35, the launch money should not open with a trailer and a cross-promo swap. It should fund a vertical program built for the feed, made with creators who already belong there, not your back catalog cropped tall and called native, and it should keep running long after launch week, because that is when people are actually looking. Keep the trailer by all means. For the older audio-first audience, it genuinely still reaches, but stop asking it to carry a show whose growth depends on people who are never going to see it. Let's get vertical. Not because the format is having a moment, but because the listeners you keep missing have already moved there, and the only show that reaches them is one a stranger can find a clip of, tall, and sound off in a feed and decide to stay. Vertical is but one territory on a much larger map. The whole atlas is that same idea at full size. Every place an audience now finds a creator and sticks with one, and how those places feed into each other. I'm premiering it on a webinar July 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I'd like you there to see all of it. Save your seat, link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Tom's article, A New Map for Podcasting. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis, in for Tom Webster, and we'll see you next week with another narrated article.